Hello, good evening, welcome to the latest episode of Crushed Custard, and today we're going to have a look at a classic album, one of those great old classic albums of the 70s, and if you've seen the title you know what it is already. It's Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin, and there's my copy, original first pressing copy. Now, before we go any further, I'll tell you a quick bit of a backstory about me and Led Zeppelin. Now, basically, I got into the old rock stuff. As everybody knows, I got into the Deep Purple and the free side of things, and then you start branching into other bands. And I thought, well, you know, I think I better give this Zeppelin a go. Everybody ran some raves about him. I went out and I bought all the Led Zeppelin albums brand new in sort of almost one go. If you like, there wasn't that many of them, was there? And they were on sale. There was a sale, and I bought the lot, all new. Anyway, I played them. And I thought, well, these are okay, but they didn't grab me. And a little while later, I wanted something else. And somebody else got on that. It was something that you couldn't get. There wasn't any internet calls in those days. And it was a case of swaps, if you like, trading things. And the person that I wanted this stuff, I can't even remember what it was now, to be honest. They said, well, you can have that, and that for your Zeppelin albums. And I thought, that's a fair deal for me, I like that. So I swapped all these Zeppelin albums, brand new, virtually, for some other old albums that I wanted. And then, about 6 months later, I was in the local second-hand shop, which, those of you from Coventry will remember what was called Hits, Misses and Vintages, which is a little plot on the HMV. It was down Far Gosford Street, down by where the Fargo Village is now. More about that in an episode to come, because I was there the other week, and that will feature in a future episode. But somebody obviously decided to clear out his Led Zeppelin collection, and I bought them all back again. But in those days, these things people didn't notice. It was just second-hand record. I bought all the Led Zeppelin back catalogue, and they were all first pressings. I didn't find that out until I wasn't interested in that until 20 years later. So this is a very first pressing of Physical Graffiti, the same as I got first pressings of all the others, including sort of a really early copy of Led Zepp 2. So I actually did all right, because I bought them all brand new, sold them, swapped them for what I wanted, and then bought them all back again cheap, and they've ended up being ones that people are paying hundreds of pounds for now. So that was my start with Zeppelin. Anyway, back on to this album, which is what we're supposed to be talking about, Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti. Is it one of my favourite Led Zeppelin albums? Yes, indeed it is, but there's more to it than just that, because as you may have noticed from the thumbnail, it wasn't initially supposed to be a double album. It was just supposed to be a normal album, and there were 8 tracks recorded for it, which is why I've called them the Graffiti 8, because I thought Graffiti 8 seems to go quite well. Anyway, before we go any further, a bit more sort of backstory to it all is that back in 1973, when they were going to go to record this album, John Paul Jones turned around and said, you know what, I don't want to be in Led Zeppelin anymore. I'm leaving, and I'm going to become the choir master at Winchester Cathedral. Yeah, I'm not making that up. And of course, the others were a little bit puzzled by this, and what should we do about that? So, of course, their manager was Peter Grant, and he sort of like could normally sort most things out. Now, around about the same sort of time, just a few months earlier, he'd signed up to become Bad Company's manager, newly formed Bad Company. Of course, Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke from Free, and Mick Rouse of Martin Hooper and Boz Burrell from King Crimson, and signed them up to Swan Song as well. Now, Zeppelin was supposed to be going into Headley Grange to record this album. Of course, with John Paul Jones having his little blip about being a choir master, they didn't go. So what happened? Peter Grant sent Bad Company in, and that became the first Bad Company album, which, again, we'll be talking about in a future episode quite soon. So what are the Graffiti 8? Well, I'll let you know which ones are the Graffiti 8 on the way through, and then do a little quick round-up of them at the end. And I'll also let you know where all the other tracks came from, as and when they come up. So let's kick it off then with side 1, because of course they decided to make it a double album, because they recorded these 8 tracks, couldn't decide on which one to leave off, couldn't do any editing. They thought it was all going to be a bit too long. Probably wouldn't have been any longer than a Genesis album at the time, but there was a sound factor and all that sort of stuff. So what they decided to do, instead of recording extra songs or chopping one up or taking one out, they decided to use tracks that they'd already recorded. Now, this is the thing that a lot of people probably don't realise, is that not only did they use songs that they'd already written, but they used songs that they were already recorded. So the 8 Graffiti songs, if you like, were recorded at those sessions. The others were recorded years before. And so that's why you may notice, if you listen carefully, that you can tell a little bit of difference sometimes between the older stuff. But we'll get onto that as and when we go along. So first, what was the first track? Custard Pie. What a song that is. That's like Frankie Howard in a Carry On film, isn't it? Lyrically, go and look it up. I'm not going to even contemplate talking about that, but all I'll tell you is it's a whopping great song. It really is good stuff. What a thundering opening track that is then. Jimmy Page with his wah-wah guitar solo going through an ARP synthesizer, and John Paul Jones playing an electric clarinet, I think, and Robert Plant doing a bit of harmonica playing in between his chews on custard pies. So there you go. What a great, thunderous, heavy start to the album that is. It's pretty good. Then the second track is The Rover. Now, this is the first of the tracks that wasn't one of the Graffiti 8. Custard Pie was a Graffiti 8. The Rover wasn't. Now, The Rover started off as an acoustic track in 1970, but it actually got recorded at the Houses of the Holy sessions and was left off that album, which quite a chunk of the non-Graffiti 8 tracks were. Then, of course, we got In My Time of Dying, which again was one of the Graffiti 8 tracks, and it's the longest track that Zeppelin ever recorded in the studio, in fact. And of course, sadly, it's one of those ones at the time they tried to claim that they wrote all on their own when they obviously didn't. But that's all been sorted out now, of course. It doesn't stop it being a brilliant song. And if you've got some of the later, I don't know if it's the later vinyl pressings, but certainly a CD pressing. I bought an early CD pressing as well. And also, there was that box that came out, wasn't there, those remasters thing. And on one or some at least of them, they edited out the coffin fit bit at the end of all that, which is a bit of a shame, I suppose. What they think of doing, maybe they would have done that if they'd already made it the original 8 tracks. That would have saved a bit of time. So that's the first side then, and for a side of an album, that's pretty good, isn't it? But things are going to get even better when you flip the thing over. Now, side 2 gets underway with another non-Graffiti 8 track. You probably guessed this one, Houses of the Holy, which unsurprisingly was recorded for the album, which was called Houses of the Holy. Now, why it was left off now, I don't really know, because I think it's a great track. It's one of my favourite Led Zeppelin tracks, actually, and it's got a great, funky, sort of infectious melody. It's absolutely wonderful. What was left off? I don't know. But anyway, there you go. On then to the next 2 tracks. Now, these next 2 tracks were a part of the Graffiti 8. The first one of them, Trampled Underfoot. Now, Trampled Underfoot, John Paul Jones has quite openly admitted that he got the idea for that from Stevie Wonder's Superstition, with that sort of like bouncing along sort of melody. It's got, it's that infectious. It sticks in your head forever, doesn't it? Now, as again, most of you watching this will know, Led Zeppelin didn't put out any singles in the UK, which I was talking about this in the local village, probably how bizarre it was that a TV programme which was only allowed to feature songs that were released as 7-inch singles and were either moving up or just entering the charts had as its theme tune a track by a band that never released a single. Well, a bit odd anyway, but there you go. But this one, Trampled Underfoot, is the nearest that we ever got to a Led Zeppelin UK single. Now, for you Zeppelin collectors out there, they were actually made, they were printed, they were done ready for the Earl's Court gigs, and they were pulled at the last minute. Now, whether any got out, I don't know. It probably cost a fortune if they do. It might well be fake as well, probably. But anyway, it was actually pressed, so I'm told. Whether there's any around and they're expensive, I don't know. I would guess if they are around, they are going to be particularly expensive. But it's the closest they ever got to releasing a single in the UK, Trampled Underfoot. And it is absolutely brilliant, even though it leads into what, for a lot of people, is probably Zeppelin's best ever song, especially if you think that maybe Whole Lot of Love and Stairway to Heaven may have been just that little bit overexposed. This next track, I don't think it could ever get overexposed. It's called Kashmir. It's like full of Eastern promise, as the saying goes. And it is. It's got everything in there. It's got everything that is Led Zeppelin is in that one song. If you've got to go and say to somebody who's come from another planet, you've got to sum up Led Zeppelin in one song, Kashmir. It's one of those things you're never going to get tired of. It's I know I was talking about people, but it's like a Deep Purple fan is never going to get bored of Child in Time. He might get bored of Smoke on the Water and Black Knight, but he's never going to get bored of Child in Time. Your hardcore Zeppelin fan is never going to get bored of Kashmir, whereas he might get a little bit bored of Whole Lot of Love and Stairway to Heaven every now and again. So, there you go. What a perfect first record, if you like, of the two record set. You could almost say that most bands would have been happy to put that out as an album with the 6 tracks on the first album. So let's have a look and see what's left on the second side, and there's some 10 out of 10 tracks on the second half of the album as well. So we kick off side 3, then start the second record with another track from the Graffiti 8, and that was In the Light. Now, it is In the Light, should I say. Now, that track is all about John Paul Jones. So I think John Paul Jones got his name first in the credits. It really does show what a talented individual he was. Now, Robert Plant wanted to play this track live, but John Paul Jones said he couldn't do it. It would be impossible for him to recreate all the synth effects and everything by himself, and he didn't want to use tapes and all that type of thing. Jimmy Page wanted to play it as well, but they had to bow to John Paul Jones's sort of knowledge of his own capabilities and what was possible. I don't think it's anything to do with his capabilities. I think it's just the fact he hadn't got enough hands, basically. But it would have been impossible to replicate the track live, and rather than put out a substandard version of it, and they got plenty of other stuff to play anyway, they decided not to play it. The next track on there was Bronny Orr, if that's how you say it. I don't know how you say it. I can't talk Welsh, but I'm sure my mate Dave, if he's still watching, will text me and tell me I've said that completely wrong. Anyway, that track, I've already been told off for that track once already, because when I did my initial review of this album, which was in written form on the old blog, probably, I don't know, about 15 years ago or something, what I stated in that was that the track Bronny Orr was just an ordinary sort of workout for Jimmy Page. It wasn't anything spectacular, and on the rest of the album it was probably one of the lesser tracks on the album. I got somebody who had a right old go at me and said, no, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was talking at the top of my hat, or the top of my head even, to say it was a rubbish song. I didn't say it was a rubbish song. I said, compared to the rest of the tracks on the album, it's going to be one of the ones that are nearer the bottom than the top, and Jimmy Page is capable of a lot more intricate stuff than that anyway, so I just thought it was a little bit of a not quite as good a track as some of the other tracks on there. So now I'll probably open myself up now to loads of people in the comments below telling me that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm talking at the top of my head, but I'm still doing it, and I still think the same thing, that if you're going to put all the tracks in order, that one would come nearer the bottom than the top, and that is what I meant when I said it was one of the ones that I would have left off it. Anyway, there you go. So that's that cleared up from 15 odd years ago. I can't remember what the bloke's name was. I did send him some eloquent sort of reply explaining all that to him, but he never bothered getting back to me. So I'm sure he's probably having a happy time somewhere else, doing something else now, rather than trying to upset me. Anyway, Bronny Orr was left over from Led Zeppelin 3, as you can probably imagine. From the sound of it, sounds very much like a Led Zeppelin 3 type track, doesn't it? Then after that one, the next one is a track called Down by the Seaside. Now again, this is another one that was from an earlier album. This one was recorded at the time of Led Zeppelin 4, which again you can sort of tell from the way that it sounds, and it was probably left off that album because maybe they thought it sounded a little bit too similar to Going to California. I don't know, but I think it's a great song up there. So it's a lovely little song, and I think it's well worth its inclusion. I think probably would have been okay if it had been on Led Zeppelin 4, or whatever you call that album, as well. Then, the track that ends side 3 is a track that sometimes for me rivals Kashmir as the best track on the album. That's 10 Years Gone. I think it's an absolutely wonderful track. It really is brilliant. I don't know what it is about it. There's just something about it, when it's the melody and all that sort of stuff, but I just think it's right smack bang up there as one of the most important Zeppelin tracks of the lot. I'd put it in the top. Obviously, I'm going to have to do that, aren't I? If I'm going to say that it's got to be rivaling Kashmir as well. It's just a brilliant song. I can't imagine there's anybody watching this who's not heard it, but it is absolutely fantastic. And of course, was one of the Graffiti 8. Yeah, Jimmy Page played 14 different guitar tracks on that one particular song as well, so that's why it might sound a bit intricate in places. Another interesting thing from that, if you listen carefully, especially if you listen through some good quality headphones, you can hear John Bonham's drum pedal squeaking while they're recording it. So that's another great part of that song. And just to go back as well, but I forgot to mention, I'm not good at editing, so I can't put it in the right place. I'm just going to tell it in there. Going back to that down by the seaside bit, that guitar solo effect, he got that playing it through a Leslie speaker. Night Flight kicks off side 4, and once again, this is a John Paul Jones showcase. Another one, I think, where he was given the first name on the credits, and it's a leftover track from Led Zeppelin 4 again. I suppose it's, in a way, it's got a bit of a feel of Misty Mountain hop to it. So again, that's probably why it was left off. They probably felt that other track was a stronger one, and so they picked that one instead. But it doesn't sound as though it would be left off anywhere. To me, it's a pretty good track, and it's good stuff. Now, the one that follows is the one that sort of baffles me a little bit, the Wanton song, because that's one of the Graffiti 8, and I don't think it's as good as the other 7 of the Graffiti 8, so that's the one I would have left off. Now, yeah, it's got a nice jazzy sort of guitar solo at the beginning, but I don't think it does much else for me anyway. And again, this music thing is all a matter of opinion. You might have a completely different idea to me. You might think the Wanton song is the best of the Graffiti 8. If it is, tell me nicely in the comments. Tell me why, and tell me what I'm missing, because it's the one track that of those 8 that I don't think is as good as all the others. So I would have made it a 7-track album, but then of course we wouldn't have got all those other tracks, would we? Because they'd have just stayed in the old Jimmy Page sort of can or whatever for years until he decided to do something with them. So thankfully the rest of them liked the Wanton song rather more than me, and ensured that we got a double album out of it. The next one is a track that I actually like least of all on the whole album, and that's Boogie with Stu. It's not, I don't think that's a particularly great track at all, and it's just filler for me. I'm capable of far better tracks than that. But again, if you like it, tell me what I'm missing, and I will gladly give it more than another go, because obviously things have to be taken in context, don't they? What I'm saying is the weakest track on here, it's still far better than a lot of stuff a lot of other bands will put in. A similar thing can be said for the track after that as well, Black Country Woman, which was actually recorded in Mick Jagger's garden, I think. And that's why at the beginning you can hear something about aeroplanes going over and all that sort of stuff. I don't know how true that story is, but I think it quite possibly could be. You never know. Some of the stuff that went on in those days, I think that many stories been told, and half the people didn't really remember what half of it happening anyway, so I don't think a lot of people are going to remember actually what did happen and what didn't. But that apparently was recorded in Mick Jagger's garden. So if it was, it was. It was originally going to have a different title as well. It was going to be called, well, it was going to be called Black Country, but it was going to have another bit on the end. But they left that bit on the end off. Then we get on to the final song on the album, which is Sick Again. Now that is a real great rock song. It is a real good sort of, yeah, they played it live as well, and it's got, you can tell it's got the feel of a song that will be good played live. Now this is another one that I had a bit of heckling over this on my written blog of it, because what I said about it was that it's a great song, which I think it is. I think it's really good. It's got a great riff and all that sort of stuff. But my criticism of it was that Robert Plant was a bit too low in the mix, and unless you got the lyrics in front of you, you knew the song inside out, back to front, or wrote it, it was very difficult to work out what he was saying. And I'll stand by that with a lot of Robert Plant's lyrics. If you don't see them, sometimes he's down in the mix. I mean, he doesn't say the expected thing, does he? Sometimes, so you can mishear it and find yourself singing it wrong for years. But anyway, with that one, that is what I said about that. And then this bloke, again, he had a right go. He said, I didn't know what I was talking about, because how could I say that was a rubbish track? I didn't say it was a rubbish track. I said it was a very, very good track, and it was just would have just liked the vocal up a little bit and a bit more decipherable. And that was it. And that, of course, Sick Again, was the last of the Graffiti 8. So there you go, that's it then. Physical Graffiti, the double album from Led Zeppelin, which wasn't really supposed to be a double album at all, but featured 8 songs recorded for the Physical Graffiti album, and then had a load of other tracks added onto it that were left off the earlier album. So the album, when it first came out in a nice sleeve where you got 2 inner sleeves with the records inside them, and you got all these windows where you could line things up and all that sort of stuff, and you could line this up as well, which was the inner, and there's a way to tell which version you've got from the way the inner works, whether it folds out, or it folds that way, whether it's laminated and all sorts of stuff. As you can imagine, with these Led Zeppelin albums, there are tons and tons of different pressings. Quick recap then, what we got on it. Custard Pie was the opening track on side 1, and that is one of the Graffiti 8. The Rover was originally written around 1970 time as an acoustic track, but was from the Houses of the Holy sessions. In My Time of Dying was a Graffiti 8 track. Houses of the Holy, obviously from Houses of the Holy. Trampled Underfoot was a Graffiti 8. Kashmir was a Graffiti 8. And then on to side 3, In the Light was another new track from the Physical Graffiti sessions. Bronny was left over from Led Zepp 3. Down by the Seaside was from Led Zepp 4. 10 Years Gone was a Graffiti 8 track. Night Flight was left over from Led Zepp 4. The Wanton Song was a Graffiti 8 track. Boogie with Stu was from the 4th album as well. And then Black Country Woman was from the House of the Holy. So that left us with Sick Again at the end, which was the final one of the Graffiti 8. So there you go. Led Zeppelin's 1975 album, Physical Graffiti. Let me know what you think of the tracks. What would you have done if it'd been your band? Would you have put out a double album? Would you have cut one of those Graffiti 8 tracks? Would you have cut 2 of those Graffiti 8 tracks? Would you have edited them down? Or are you glad, like I am, that it came out as a double album? And to be honest, back in the day when I bought it, which would have been 1980 time, 81, I was spent a lot of time on this. There was no internet in those days, so we didn't do any checking. It was probably in the music press at the time, but that would have been sort of 5 years before, and 5 years in music back in the 1970s and early 1980s was a long time indeed. So I don't think I even realised myself that it wasn't all recorded at the same time until much later. I'm sure there's probably a few people around who probably didn't even realise that until now. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back soon with another look at another classic rock album. Anyway, see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe as it helps the channel to grow. See you soon.